Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I'm a bit confused at the moment because I don't think the opposition really know where they're heading at the moment with this budget, because they don't particularly want to talk about last night's budget. They want to talk about last year's budget. And that's fine if they want to do that, because we absolutely recognise and stand behind the fact that we did need to make tough decisions last year. We did need to make some difficult and necessary choices for the Australian people, because the path we were on was completely unsustainable, and those decisions were made. Now, they want to talk about that last year's budget because that's in their political interest, but they don't want to. There were very few questions today, I noticed, in question time actually about last night's budget, because last night's budget does build on those tough decisions we made last year and allows the Australian people now to start reap the dividends of those tough choices. You never are able to deliver success in life before you do hard work. The only place in the world where success comes before work is in the dictionary. And we had to do the hard work last year before we delivered success to the Australian people, and I'm confident that last night's budget will build confidence in our economy. It will build confidence particularly among small businesses and farmers in our country, and they will then have the confidence to invest and create the jobs and opportunity that only they can create. We can't do that here. Unfortunately, as much power as we think we might have, we can't wave a magic wand and make people have a job and have an opportunity in our life. We must rely on the individual enterprise of all Australians to bring that about, and last night's budget will help achieve that. I particularly want to focus on the fact that last night's budget enshrines the fact that taxes will be lower under a coalition government, and that will create more opportunity and more confidence for our business sector. Because under the previous government, revenue as a percentage of GDP under the former government was escalating and going through the roof. You won't hear them talk about it. You won't hear them talk about it. But what you need to look at is not their last budget, is not Labor Party's last budget. You need to look at the pre-election forecast that was done by Treasury and Finance before the election. And when you look at the independent numbers that were done before the election, our revenue to GDP was going through the roof, because they came to government when our taxes, or our revenue to GDP, was just 23.3% of GDP. By the time of the election, it escalated, or had gone down and then come back up. But under the pre-election forecasts that were done before the last election, our taxes to GDP were going to raise to 23.9% of GDP, then to 24.6% of GDP, and then finally in the last year of those forward estimates, which was 2015-16 at the time, to 24.8% of GDP. Now, every one of those numbers is now lower. Every one of those numbers is now lower. In that year, that final year, the revenue GDP was 24.2% of GDP. Then 24 the previous year, 23.5. Now, I'll take that interjection through you, Mr Acting Deputy, from Senator Lundy, because what they don't quite understand on the other side is when your economy grows, you do get higher taxes to GDP, and we had a weak economy under the former government, and that's why taxes to GDP fell precipitously in their first years of their government. But they had plans on the similar years as we did to increase taxes to GDP. If you compare year to year, and that's the appropriate comparison, year to year, taxes are now lower under a coalition government than they would have been under a Labor government that wanted to hit our wealth-producing industries in our country with a carbon tax and a mining tax and put jobs at risk across our whole economy. Now, we are serious in this government. I want to take up some of the points through you, Mr Acting Deputy President, that Senator Sterle was raising. It is about last year's budget, which they continue to want to talk about. We are serious about achieving serious reform of our spending system, and so much of our spending does go towards health and education. But we are on an unsustainable path in growth in those particular spending initiatives. Now, if we spend around in the budget papers, and I don't know if the Labor Party reads the budget papers, but on page 5 of 23, the budget papers state that we spend around $18 billion a year on public hospitals, and it's growing at somewhere between 6 and 7% a year at the moment. Now, if that rate of growth continues for 40 years, hospital spending alone will take a third to 50%, depending on how you measure it, of our Commonwealth budget in 40 years' time. Now, we can't do that. That is just absurd. So somebody has to be serious here. Some serious people have to sit down and work out, well, how are we going to make sure that we can deliver the great hospital services we have in this nation within an affordable amount? And we are the party that is about serious discussions in our nation about how we can grow jobs, opportunity and a sustainable public service in our system. The other side simply want to oppose, and we cannot return to that path.